Welcome to Watches with Dennis and Happy New Year. As we've ended 2024, it is time for me to cover my most worn watches of the year. However, this time there is a change up. In 2024, I decided I was going to fully nerd out and actually log information on my watch wearing. So each day I noted in a spreadsheet which watch I wore. If I wore more than one, then that date got multiple entries. As such, this video will broadly be carved into three parts. First, I'll talk specifically about the 5 most worn watches from my collection. Second, I'll provide summary information of what my watch wearing experience looked like overall. And yes, there will be charts. And then third, I'll discuss how I think 2025 is going to go. So let's go ahead and get started. My 5th most worn watch of 2024 is the Rolex Explorer II, reference 16570. I wore it on 33 different days over the year. This is my longest owned watch in my entire collection by well over a decade. And before I got into collecting, this was the only watch I wore at all. And even with all the changes I've seen in my collection over the last few years, I still find out that the Explorer II tends to make it into the top 5. In fact, I can't think of a single time I've done a top 5 where it didn't make it. It is my only GMT watch, and it has always been my only GMT watch. So that does give it a situational advantage. Every trip I had in 2024 that involved a different time zone saw me only bringing and wearing the Explorer II. That said, I think it has objectively slipped more and more as the watches I've otherwise gained into my collection have been refined. My 4th most worn watch in 2024 is my Moser Pioneer Center Seconds. It's the reference 3200-1205. I wore it on 34 different days over the year, just squeaking by the Rolex. While I've always loved the dial of my Pioneer, it is a very big watch and it does not lend itself to as many situations as I would like. However, my biggest obstacle originally was the strap. It was just too loose on the default strap. I did eventually learn early in 2024 that Moser makes a smaller strap for these watches, and I was finally able to find a Moser dealer in another state because we don't have any Moser dealers in the Kansas City area, and I was able to order it through them. The watch wears so much more comfortably now. I've started to put a lot more wrist time on it, in part sort of driven by that honeymoon period of having the new strap. My 3rd most worn watch of 2024 is my Citizen watch, specifically from their Citizen line. It doesn't really have a name. The reference is the AQ4100-65W. I wore it on 36 different days over the year. This is my first watch on the list that actually gets a lot of time because I like to wear it to work. It came into the collection this year, and thanks to the lightness of the titanium coupled with its quartz movement and its overall aesthetic, it's become a very popular grab-and-go watch for me. It completely killed my wearing of my other titanium watch, which was the Oris Pro Pilot X, which I ended up selling in 2024, since the Citizen always got chosen instead when I wanted to wear something lightweight. My 2nd most worn watch of 2024 is my Parmigiani Fleurier Kalpa Tonda. This is the reference PFC 224-120-1100. I wore it on 37 different days over the year. This watch had a big advantage because I got it right at the start of 2024. I actually paid for it at the end of 2023. And so it enjoyed a big stretch of time on my wrist. I started 2024 thinking I wasn't going to get very many watches in the year, which turned out to be a vicious lie, but as a new dress watch, I ended up wearing it a lot to work. It is my only white gold watch. It remains my favorite watch to hand wind, despite that the watch is actually an automatic. I got it because of the interesting dial configuration. My most worn watch in 2024 is my Lange Lange 1 reference 101.032. I wore it on 46 different days over the year, and as you may have noticed, that is a huge jump up over the other watches that are represented in the top 5 list, which had a spread of 33 days to 37 days. But for me, this isn't surprising. The Lange 1 is easily my favorite watch in my entire collection. It's not the most comfortable watch. It's not the lightest watch. It doesn't have the best hand-winding experience despite being a hand-wind-only movement, and it's not my most accurate watch either. But no other watch do I enjoy wearing as much as I enjoy the Lange 1. It's the sum of its parts that make it work so well for me. This was a watch I was very nervous about getting when I originally purchased it. I traded a lot of watches, I think 5, towards it, plus a sizable amount of money. I think it was the most at the time I ever put out in cash for a watch. But it has been my best watch purchasing decision ever in terms of collecting. All right, so with my top 5 out of the way, let's go over some statistics for those of you that are still watching and interested in such things. So I want to go ahead and start with some quick highlights. I wore 22 different watches in 2024. Of those 8, or approximately 36%, were new watches that I got in 2024. 6 of the watches, or approximately 27%, were watches I had purchased prior to 2024, but during 2024 got sold, traded, or some other mechanism removed them from my collection. And 8 watches, or approximately 36%, were watches I owned from prior years, and by the end of 2024, I still owned them. 2024 was a leap year, so it had 366 days in it. However, I wore 395 different watches across those days, which means I wore an average of 1.08 watches per day. The first chart I want to show you is a pie chart, which represents the percentage each watch of the 22 I wore during 2024 was of my 395 watches worn. You might recall that when I was discussing my top 5 worn watches, a lot were really close together, like my Pioneer at number 4 having 34 wears versus my Explorer at number 5 with 33 wears. Likewise, my Kalpa Tonda was at number 2 with 37 wears, and that was against my Citizen watch at number 3 with 36 wears. So you can see there's quite a bit of clustering that happens at various points, with a slew of watches in the 1% to 3% range. I have another cluster in the 5 to 7% range, and then my top 5 rested mostly at the 8 and 9% range. My number 1 watch, the Lange 1, was the only watch that reached double digits, consisting of 12% of my wears throughout 2024. But I think it's this second chart that is going to be more meaningful to many of you, as it actually reflects the wear count of each watch that was used to achieve those 395 worn watches across 2024. The watches are, of course, sorted, so the most worn is at the top of the chart, but you'll see there are 3 colors in play. Anything in blue is a watch that I owned before 2024 and I owned at the end of 2024. Any watch with a green bar is a watch I actually got in 2024, and any watch with a red bar is a watch that left my collection at some point in 2024. You'll notice the red bars are relatively clustered, and this is likely driven by me wearing them several times to be sure I wanted to actually get rid of them, basically giving them a last chance to survive my purge. In fact, the Zenith Chronomaster Original was originally on the chopping block and ended up surviving, and then it got more wrist time because I kept it, and it rised out of that grouping. But there was at one point where it lived with those other red bar watches during the year. Unsurprisingly, new watches often get a honeymoon period. As a general but not universal rule, when I get a new watch, I wear it for 7 days in a row, as I often do that to help work up my review videos that I like to do on occasion for this channel. All of the green bars that are below the red bars on this chart are watches that came in late this year. So it's not that I didn't like them very much and that they might be on the chopping block in the future. You just need to bear in mind that they came in so late that they just didn't perform very well. I do think wearing 22 watches is a lot, but that is not all my fault. I obtained 8 watches in 2024, but 3 of those were actually gifts. 2 of them, the Bulova Accutron and also the Seiko 7N43-9070, were my dad's watches that he gave to me. Before getting those, I had already recognized a general discomfort with the sheer volume of watches I had, which is why I did make a concerted effort to sell off watches. And I actually expected to end the year with fewer watches than I started it with. All 3 gifted models arrived after my sales happened. So had it worked out as I planned, I was actually going to drop my total watch count versus 2023 by 1 watch. This final part of the video is going to be me briefly discussing how I think 2025 will go in terms of my wearing behavior. Obviously, I have a number of watches that are no longer in the collection. So even if I make absolutely 0 moves and keep all the same watches I have right now at the end of 2025 and gain no new watches, there's still a lot of wearing experience that's going to be different, because I did have 48 daily watch wears that are now out of the system. I don't have those watches at my disposal anymore, and they are not coming back. And that's a sizable chunk, especially since I only was slightly above 1 watch per day in terms of my average number of watches I wear, and I do not expect that behavior to change. Normally, if I had a day where I wore more than 1 watch, it was because a new watch arrived that day, so I ended up wearing 2, or it'd be like the day I needed to mow, so I might wear my work watch to work and wear my G-Shock when I'm out using the lawnmower. It's those sort of behaviors. So, of the top 5, the Lange 1 almost assuredly will remain in the list. It's so drastically outperformed all my other watches in 2024, and it remains my favorite piece even at the start of 2025, that I can't envision that it won't be in the top 5. Maybe it won't be number 1, but it will almost assuredly be in the top 5. The Citizen watch has tended to pace pretty consistently in getting wear time, so it might also still end up making the top 5, but there's a little bit less certainty with that, of course. The other 3 that were in the 2024 top 5 are really up in the air. The Breguet Classique has a good chance to jump into the top 5. That is a watch that did not enjoy anywhere near a full year of ownership for me in 2024. I got it, I think, in the summer, and so it is a popular choice for me to wear to work at this point. So I think it's going to have a very good chance of moving up that list. As for my sports watches, I could easily see my Parmigiani Tonda PF moving up more, and it is currently my favorite watch on a bracelet, so that's why I think that's very, very likely. In terms of other moves, the Baltic Aquascaf will likely fall. I just so rarely wear dive watches anymore, and it actually is the only dive watch left in my collection. I got rid of all the other ones during 2024. I have been waiting for an opportunity to buy a Rolex No Date Submariner at retail, and if that opportunity manifests in 2025, I will almost assuredly be getting rid of the Aquascaf to make space and keep myself at that one dive watch limit, because I just am not wearing them otherwise. Other than that, I'd say my dad's old Seiko, the 7N43-9070, will probably improve its performance. I actually do tend to wear that on occasion to work. I just got it so late in the year, it didn't perform well in my overall 2024 metrics. But anyway, I'll plan to keep logging the data and seeing what changes do or do not happen with my behavior in 2025. That's it for this video. Thank you so much if you made it to the end. Please leave a like if you found the video interesting, and please subscribe if you want to know when I will release new videos. Have a great day, everybody.